Wolanski, and I'm the director of the Alliance for Nonprofit Impact at United Way. We are really excited to have hard data that we can share with you about the state of Rhode Island's nonprofit sector. I wanted to give a special thank you to our congressional staffers who are on. We have a number of congressional offices represented today, and appreciate your focus on supporting nonprofits in Rhode Island. We did add a number of things to the survey this year to ask about the impact of federal actions, and so that may be of particular interest to you all. We've been doing this survey this is our sixth survey, and we started during COVID to look at the impact of COVID on nonprofits, and then expanded this survey to look more broadly at the challenges facing nonprofits across the state. We use this data. We share it with the members of the General Assembly, with state leadership on the executive side, as well as obviously share it with our congressional delegation. Yesterday, we also had a presentation of this data to funders from Grantmakers Council of Rhode Island, because there's important information that funders need to know about the ways that they should be supporting nonprofits here in Rhode Island. And we will be sharing it extensively moving forward. We have an exciting interactive opportunity for you to engage with the data more individually after the presentation. But just wanted you to know that as we thank you all for taking the time to be here to learn about this, there's also nonprofits on here who spend a lot of time on the survey. And so we take this data and we use it to really highlight the challenges that you're facing. So the time you spent is very well spent because it gives us actual actionable data that we can use with both policymakers and funders. So this year we were able to work with Elaine Budish from Three Axis Consulting. I was going to say Third Axis, and I'm like, no, it's Three Axis. So really grateful for her support in this. She's going to be going through the first part of the survey data. We also have Jaya from the United Way data team, who put together a fabulous interactive dashboard for you that she'll be going over at the end. I'll talk a little bit about some of the federal implications, and also come back to talk about some of the takeaways from the survey at the end. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Elaine.
Thanks, Nancy. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. I'm excited to be able to share with you some of these data that we have collected with many of your help. I will say you will not be surprised by most of what you see here today. So really it's a conversation about what we do with the data that we're hoping to get to with this. A couple of notes on the methodology. We did get about 260 plus responses. There were a couple of duplicates from multiple staff at the same organization, which we were able to match and deduplicate. There are specific population N sizes for respondent site numbers for each question. And so you'll see that, and sometimes even within a question, there'll be different N sizes indicated for different components of the question, depending on whether it was relevant or not to the respondee. Feel free to throw clarifying questions in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation, or if they're a quick, easy one and I managed to see it, I'll try to clarify in the moment, but looking forward to the conversation at the end. So this is just, we're going to start with a quick overview of who responded and how, while it's not a random sampling representative of nonprofits in the state, we did get a really good variety and a fair amount of distribution across different types of organizations. And so that's really great. You are not meant to see the tiny numbers on here. You'll be able to go in and play with that on the dashboard. This is really just to give you a visual sense of the range for organizations. So we had only about 1% of the survey respondents, so it was only 2 organizations that have no revenue or had no revenue in the previous fiscal year. And we had about 21% that were below 100,000. So really smaller organizations with quite small operating budgets, and 13% that are over 5 million. For the years in existence, the biggest group was 22%. And we really see like a pretty solid group in 1 year through about 60 years, and then 60 to 90 years, we see this very small drop off. Not really sure why, but I guess a lot of organizations maybe weren't formed at that time. We're not sure. It'd be an interesting thing to explore. And then we have, again, 8% of our organizations over 90 years old. And so we have some really long-standing community institutions represented in here. 1 second. My son is at home today for school. I am leading a session. You need to go.
Can I switch my account because I need to work?
Sorry, this is real life. I'm sure I'm not the only one with kids home this week because of the snow. All right. So we are in this one talking about staff size, and about 20% of respondents only have part-time staff or are all volunteer organizations. And we have about 53%, half of the respondents who have 1 to 10 full-time paid staff. We also saw a pretty strong distribution of part-time paid staff, and a really nice distribution also of volunteers. Again, this is just the demographics of the respondents. And I'm going to keep going through this part pretty quickly. For the focus areas, respondents were able to select all that apply. And so an organization that provides more than one type of service, or it works in more than one focus area, would check all of them, which is why the numbers are definitely more than 100% here. But what we saw was that youth development, arts and culture, basic needs, and workforce were the greatest areas of focus. But it really does show over the whole list the really nice range of types of organizations and areas of focus that are represented in the data that you're seeing. This is not just social service organizations or just advocacy organizations, et cetera. So this slide comes with some caveats. So this is a map of respondents, not where their offices are located, but where their services are delivered. And the only people who were asked to answer this question are organizations that provide services or programs. So advocacy organizations would not have answered this question. There were 153 respondents who answered. And so an organization, for example, that works in Providence, North Providence, Smithfield, and Central Falls would have checked all of those. The Alliance is working with Brown University in partnership this year to build out a map that actually has lists of services and programs and nonprofits in every community. And so this is really just the start of that, but we wanted to share it to show you the initial insights and information that we were finding. All right, now we can get into the meat of it. So for the community outlook, for the last few years, we've asked in this survey what the demand has looked like for safety net and basic needs providing organizations. And so this is a smaller end size. It's 49 organizations responded to the survey who work in basic needs supports. And last year, 96% of the organizations in this category responded that they saw higher demand than during the pandemic. This year, we asked, not compared to the pandemic for the first time, but just compared to the previous year. And we still had 88% saying they saw an increase. And every year since this question has been asked, so 22, 20, I think it was 23, 24, and 25 surveys, there was an increase. We saw no organizations responding that there was a lower demand this year. This is not surprising. We did also ask about top community needs, and this question was not just asked of the safety net supporting organizations, but of everyone. And not surprisingly, again, affordable housing, healthcare, behavioral mental health, cost of living, food insecurity, and education, very consistent with the previous year's surveys. We also asked about changes to SNAP and Medicaid and the impact that that is having. Those kicked in right before this survey went out this winter. And the respondents indicated concerns about access to basic needs, food, and healthcare for the clients that they serve. And they indicated concern about the secondary needs being met, or the secondary impacts of these changes on their clients. So things like program access, the decision making that families need to make in terms of reallocating money for food. The other piece that the organizations mentioned, and these are some representative quotes that we pulled for you, was actually around their own capacity to meet the needs, and that the changes to SNAP and Medicaid specifically are driving a real strain on their resources and the resources of those who support them. And that's a theme that continues throughout a number of these questions. We also asked, what are you seeing? What are you doing? How are you collaborating to address these changes? And everyone, I'm sure, on this call and everyone who responded to the survey really understands the need to work together and support each other. And a bunch of folks actually also called out the larger community, not just nonprofits, for stepping up in this moment. Because this moment requires something different than business as usual. And that might be new partnerships, information sharing forums, service delivery or advocacy changes, or adjustments. And there's, I think this is a way to think about the silver lining of hard times. Folks are working with organizations and communicating more and better and leaning into the advocacy side, maybe in ways that they haven't before. And that's something to continue. All right, shifting to finances. This is a hard section. It is not surprising, but it is stark when you see it in the numbers. We asked, this is not historic data here that on the left side, we asked organizations responding to this year's survey, what was your financial status in 2024, 2025, and predicted for 2026 in terms of whether you're operating at a deficit, steady goes, income and expenses approximately equivalent, or operating with a surplus. And the biggest change we saw was that folks noted that between 25 and 26, almost half as many would be operating with a surplus. So that's a huge drop. We also see a continued increase in the percentage of organizations that responded that are operating at a deficit. We combine this with our question about current cash reserves. Best practices in nonprofit management are to have at least 6 months in reserves, ideally a year. only a quarter of organizations have 6 months or more of operating expenses in cash reserves. And this is an indication of extreme financial vulnerability in the nonprofit sector in Rhode Island. We also asked some open-ended questions, and all of the analysis around the greatest concerns facing the nonprofits in Rhode Island is funding. 80% mentioned some version of this in this open-ended question about their greatest challenges. Nothing else got over 20% of respondents mentioning it. It's on everyone's mind, and it's critical. We asked about what changes folks would be making given the financial situations, and new collaborations or partnership opportunities. I mean, that can be both challenging and really impactful in a positive way. Restructuring, again, can be powerful, can also be really challenging, can be related to layoffs. Over a quarter, 28% of respondents are considering eliminating programs or services, and almost half said that they would be restructuring in some way. So this is also a lot of change for the people doing the work, as well as for the leaders of these organizations navigating all the shifts that have to happen. All right, so let's talk specifically for a minute about funding source changes. I'm going to explain the chart first and then the way that we're analyzing it. So this is oh, I lost my key on here. I used to have a key for the red, gray, and green. I apologize for that. The red is lower funding in 25 than in 24. The gray is approximately the same funding across the 2 years, and the green is increases in that funding source in 25 compared to 24. Every category we asked about, and we asked about many categories of funding, every category had some increase and some decrease. What we wanted to look at was really the net decreases in particular. The biggest absolute as well as net decrease was in federal funding, not surprising. But that was a whopping 31% net decrease. Corporate grants was the next biggest net decrease at 14%. This is challenging because overall, the corporate sector is seeing record profits. State funding also was a net decrease of 11%. These are places where advocacy and engagement of elected officials, of leaders, and our community can really make a difference. We also saw a 30 percentage point decrease in foundation grants, but we saw a 25% increase for other folks. And so we're reading this as, and this is corroborated through some of the open-ended responses from some of the organizations about this question, that it's really a shift in funding priorities to cover gaps in some of the really core basic needs that before were covered through government funding. We also see a net increase in individual donations and in fee-for-service. I'm going to talk about the fee-for-service for a second first. That one is really, in many ways, an emerging opportunity or area where nonprofits are working to build diverse revenue streams, which is exciting. For the individual donations, Rhode Island, and many of you probably already know this because I think this is one of the soapboxes Nancy stands on to make sure that we all know this. Individual giving is Rhode Island ranks like one of the lowest in the country for individual giving rates. And so adding to individual donations is wonderful, but it is not at a level where it is going to really close gaps. In addition, public funding cuts that are happening have exposed a structural truth that individual philanthropy can soften the blow, but it cannot replace the scale and stability of decades of government investment in the nonprofit sector and in the services provided through partner organizations. So all of this paints a picture of significant financial need and instability. Additionally, we know expenses are increasing. This is happening for all of us in our personal lives as well. But we had over 3/4 of respondents naming that their expenses increased between 2024 and 2025. We did ask why, and there's a range of reasons, and many of them are related to rising costs, but some of them are also about expanded programs or serving more clients because need has increased. And so there's definitely a mix of reasons, but regardless of the reasons, money is in short supply to fund the important mission-driven work. We also know that health insurance and benefit costs are a huge part of an organization's budget. And almost 2/3 of nonprofits that offer health insurance have increases in 2026 from 2025 of more than 15%. I will say for myself, I was not expecting these numbers to be quite this high. And this is a lot for organizations to absorb, especially at a time when funding is continuing to be shaky or even decreasing in many of the larger funding categories. So we asked how organizations are planning to handle these increases. And you can see, some are planning to split the cost with their employees, some organizations. Some organizations are planning to absorb the cost. This was also a select all that apply, so there might be some combinations of these that organizations are engaging in. But there's a whole bunch here that are around different programs or plan structures, higher deductibles, which is essentially passing the cost on to the staff, less coverage, which again passes on healthcare cost to the staff, and some directly just naming that the difference of the premium cost would be passed on. There's no easy or good answer to this, but it is a place where there's some creative problem solving potentially needed. So the financial situation also has an impact on staffing decisions. We saw that the biggest increase was in benefit reductions to cut costs between 2025 and then predicted changes or actions taken in 2026. So more organizations than last year are planning to cut benefits. About the same number postponing hiring to limit costs. You can look at 2025 as the total of the 11 plus the 16 here and the 11 plus the 18 for 2026. And we're showing you which organizations said they were doing these activities in more than 1 year. It's not a one-time thing for them. Small numbers still of salary reductions, and approximately the same year over year, same with the staff layoffs and furloughs. Right, I'm going to hand it over to Nancy.
Great, thank you. You can go to the next slide. So all of you know about their different impacts of federal action. So we asked questions about both funding related federal actions, but also the impact of executive orders. This question was specifically about the impact of federal orders around DEI. And almost half of the nonprofits had made changes or had negative impact based on the DEI executive orders. Some eliminated programs, some changed websites, changed mission statements. Really significant reductions in the work. In other organizations, like the one on the bottom right, we continue welcoming diversity and encouraging others to do the same. We just don't use the DEI acronym. But one of the overarching themes is just the top right, extensive anxiety and time wasted considering contingency plans when we should be focusing on fulfilling our mission. So the internal impact of those DEI related executive orders, although I would want to say, once again, executive orders are not law, but they do have a chilling impact on the work of nonprofits. They also have an impact on clients. And so if you look at the upper left, we have families who are afraid to access services out of fear. Part of that is coming from the rhetoric that has been shared by the administration. The impact of federal funding changes has been felt by nonprofits in seeing that now nonprofits who receive federal funding, so we saw 49% of nonprofits who have received federal funding in the last 2 years lost federal funding to some extent. Those organizations are looking to make up that funding by looking at private funding sources, so foundations, corporations, individual donors. So that leads us to the quote on the upper left, which more competition in raising funds, because now you have the organizations that previously were getting funding from federal or state sources are now competing for the same dollars from private sources. We've also seen private funders, foundations, corporations pull back on some of their own funding of DEI-related initiatives. And so that is impacting the ability. So the executive orders were focused on federal funding, but their impact has been to change some of the funding priorities of local funders, which means that both private and public funds have been impacted by those executive orders. So 1 in 10 of the nonprofits who responded lost private funding due to funder hesitancy connected with the executive orders. We asked about the impact of immigration enforcement activity in Rhode Island. And most of us, when we think about immigration enforcement, we're thinking about what's going on in Minneapolis, what's going on in Chicago, Memphis. But we need to also be cognizant of the fact that ICE is taking enforcement action here as well. Almost a third of the direct service nonprofits reported reduced in-person participation due to immigration enforcement fears. So that means that there are Rhode Islanders who are not able to access the services that they need because they are afraid of immigration enforcement activities. The quote at the bottom, attacks on immigrants and people of color in general have directly affected our members and community as a whole. ICE has been present in the parking lot of the building where our office is located and in the community on a regular basis. Community members have been kidnapped and families separated. Some members have chosen to self-deport, which is not an easy decision, as it has an economic as well as an emotional impact on families. But you can imagine if ICE is seen even once in the parking lot of a nonprofit, that's going to impact how Rhode Islanders feel about accessing services at that location, because obviously they could be back. So we also have seen significant racial profiling of clients and staff. A third of nonprofits have had either staff or clients racially profiled. and almost a quarter have seen ICE presence in their community. So that's also resulted in decreased enrollment in public benefit programs. So again, Rhode Islanders not being able to access the services and supports that they're entitled to. Because I think it's also important to remember that it is not just folks who may be undocumented who are reluctant to go to these areas. If you have a family member or friends, or you've seen folks who are American citizens being arrested, you're still going to be reluctant to go to those locations, even if you are a legal resident or a citizen. We asked about safety and security issues for the first time, and there's been a dramatic increase in safety and security issues from 2024 to 2025, almost double the reports of negative client safety experiences, and 37% more reports of negative staff safety experiences. And 1 in 10 nonprofits reported vandalism or damage to facilities. So on top of everything else that nonprofits are facing, a lot of them are having to redo their safety and security protocols, install additional safety and security monitoring, which is not something that is going to help the stress that they feel on a daily basis in providing the services that they do to the community. But it's important for funders to understand that that's an additional component that needs to be considered when providing support for nonprofits moving forward, particularly those who are working with populations targeted by the administration.
All right. Thanks, Nancy. I'm going to take this back to talk about staffing. There are a lot of slides in this section. Some of them I'll go through pretty quickly. So we had 77% of respondents report that at least some of their staff are experiencing burnout. A third reported that many or all of their staff are experiencing burnout. Not surprising, not new either, but I think the numbers are getting bigger. We're comparing this with another measure of staff well-being, which is staff either contemplating leaving the sector or having already left the nonprofit sector. Half of nonprofits report that at least some of their staff are contemplating leaving, and a third, again, report that staff have already left the sector. These burnout levels and this level of turnover are not sustainable and leave a big burden and cost on both the organization, but also discontinuity for clients and for programs. And there's an inherent both inefficiency, but also emotional and relational consequence to these high rates. Organizations are also having difficulty filling open positions. Of the nonprofits that hired in 2025, a third of their positions remained unfilled for 3 or more months. And organizations named low wages and low salaries in the Rhode Island nonprofit sector as the primary challenges in staff recruitment. And again, that's related, right, to resource availability and to the funding agency's perception of the value of the work and the people doing the work. Hiring activity, we asked what was happening in 2025 and then what's predicted for 2026 in terms of hiring to fill existing positions and hiring to fill new positions. And we're seeing a shift from filling existing positions, knowing that some organizations had actually held off on filling open positions as a cost-saving measure. Filling new positions can mean program expansion, fewer open existing roles if they were filled in 2025, changes to organizational structure, or expansion of services in certain organizations. And we did not ask about those details, so I think that's those are hypotheses. We asked about benefits provided to staff. And this is, we're getting into a set of questions that are useful for, and organizations often ask for in terms of benchmarking against other Rhode Island organizations. So 16% of organizations with paid staff did not offer benefits. 83% offered paid vacation, 80% paid sick time, 66% for health coverage, 59% for dental. So you can kind of see that that's the ranked in order from most common to least common, but we're still only at 83% for paid vacation time and paid sick time. We also are benchmarking how much paid time off is offered. This is in absolute numbers, not percentages. But we wanted to show holidays, 11 to 15 days is the standard, or is the most common. For vacation, that's a similar range with a sort of equal balance on either side of 6 to 10, 16 to 20. For sick time, again, most common is 6 to 10 days, some offering less, 1 to 5, and some more. And then there's a handful of organizations, not a handful, there's a fair number of organizations that actually offer other paid time off. 29 offer 1 to 5 additional days, and a handful offering even more than that in other categories of paid time off. All right, so for the hourly pay range of lowest paid employees, and again, this relates to the hiring and retention challenges, 10% responded that they pay under 15 or 15 an hour, I guess, being minimum wage. 38% $15 to $20 an hour, and 32% $20 to $25 an hour, and then about a fifth over $25 an hour. And this is, we did get some open-ended qualitative comments as well around actually a concern, a mismatch of values of the respondent who is a leader in the organization, and the fact that they cannot pay more, or that they do not have the resources to pay more, but they think that this is not, the wages they're able to pay, not just for the lowest paid employees, but for all their employees, are insufficient. We also asked about the executive director pay range, and you can see we actually had 14% of our respondents let us know that their executive director and other leadership are unpaid. The biggest area, or the biggest pay range, most common, was $75,000 to $100,000 for an executive director. I'll give you a little bit, no, actually, I'm not sure. I'm not going to say what I was going to say because I'm not sure. Sorry. So that's the status.
Can I just jump in for a second, Elaine? We are going to be creating a tool for you all, to all members, to do a deeper dive into some of this benefit information. So you'll be able to look at kind of a similar size organization, what types of benefits they're offering. And I know it's not a full salary survey, it's not comprehensive, but hopefully it'll help you to get some better sense of, okay, here's a number of other organizations who are in my size staff range, and this is the way that they're approaching benefits at this point. So just wanted to say that we will be making that available on our website for members in just a little bit. So,
thanks, Nancy. That was what I wasn't completely sure about, what the what the plan was for that. So, And Jaya is going to show you some other data that you can manipulate in a similar way on an interactive dashboard at the end of this. And so you'll get a little teaser of what will be possible with this data as well. All right, this is the last couple bits of data are around organizational leadership and capacity. And one of the biggest things that we saw very clearly through a couple different data points was really that a wave of executive leader retirements is coming and is already starting. We asked about engagement in leadership transition or succession planning, and there was a large jump happening in terms of that occurring in 2026. Over a third of nonprofits have leaders who are anticipating retirement within the next 5 years. So those line up. And we have quite a range of executive director tenure, which is like a proxy for experience level as well. And so we really do see like there's quite a few very new under 5 years in the role. Which speaks to also a need for continued support for leadership. And for building a pipeline of leadership, even for folks who are not yet in those roles. We asked about diversity, and there's a lot of different ways to look at these data, but one of the things we looked at was the percentage of organizations who have less than 25% of leadership and staff who are BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, or people of color. The highest percentage of or category is senior leaders, and then board and staff, and then all staff. And it's important to always check leadership roles versus all staff, in particular when you're looking at these data, if you're not familiar with them, because often an organization will have a skewed, and this is true across the country, will have a skewed proportion of BIPOC folks in lower paying, less and non-leadership roles. And so what we really want to see is the same level of diversity and a good level of diversity across that. We did also look, there are 16% of boards that have no BIPOC folks on them. 34% of responding leadership teams that have no BIPOC folks, and 26% of organizations that have no BIPOC folks on staff at all. So that is also a number that's important to look at. The second piece on this slide is around the CEO or executive director identities, and we asked again, select all that apply. We had a very complicated visual that Jaya created for us with all of the intersectionalities. Some folks had up to 5 intersectional identities named in the survey, which is, you know, really showing the complex nature of this. But because we wanted to protect individual identities, we are not sharing that piece publicly. But we do have this to share that there is quite a lot of diversity, and I would say it's actually a small minority that only have none or one of these disadvantaged identities. And if folks have specific questions about specific types of intersections here, there's probably some data we can share as well that is more detailed. All right, and then the last piece of data before I pass it back to Nancy to recap the themes for us is organizations who responded to the survey, and those of you who are on the call who responded, this will be very familiar. We asked you to tell us where your strengths are and where you have some areas of weakness. And the strengths really were, universally pretty much around mission-related programs and services, and also collaboration with community partners, which is more necessary now than ever. So that's wonderful. And actually some pretty strong financial management responses as well, which is great. The areas of challenge were around fundraising, evaluation, and operations in particular. We do have this sort of middle area here of some amount of challenge, but still falling more on the positive side. So with that, I will hand it back to Nancy.
Thank you. So want to just quickly summarize some of the themes. So we have some time for Jaya to present the dashboard and then for you to have questions. We scheduled this to go to 11:30, but we may finish a little bit early. So obviously the needs in the community continue to increase, and funding is decreasing. That is not a good combination. And we are essentially entering this resource constrained time that is going to require new approaches to the work that we do. We've seen significant disruptions to community work and the ability of Rhode Islanders to access services. Staff burnout is a continuing theme, and also the need to support a leadership pipeline for the upcoming retirements that we are expecting. We need to continue to address issues of diversity in particular leadership and boards, and we need to be cognizant of the safety and security concerns that are increasing for nonprofits and their staff and clients. So recommendations from the Alliance perspective, obviously general operating support and multi-year investments from funders, both public and private, are essential. Nonprofits are, when they are struggling to make ends meet and not sure where their next funding is going to come from, it's really difficult to make work, to invest in the work in a way that is going to be sustainable. So that is really important on the behalf of funders. We need to see collective action and advocacy to protect essential services, and to recognize the critical role that nonprofits play in providing those services. We are seeing increasingly hostile rhetoric coming from congressional investigations, congressional hearings. So on the federal level in particular, we are hearing lots of false information coming out about the work of nonprofits and the role that nonprofits play in their communities. And so we need to work together to address that and ensure that there are still resources invested into this important work. On the state level, we really would want to see more collaboration between state government and nonprofits in the planning and prioritization of essential services. We know that there's going to be a limitation on the federal resources available. And so we really need to strategize about what things will be prioritized and how we will enable Rhode Islanders to access those services. But that needs to be a partnership conversation between nonprofits and state government. Funders need to provide support for nonprofits to look deeply at their finances and to help them think creatively about whether they need to restructure, whether they need to develop new business models, partnerships and mergers, legal support, and safety measures. Nonprofit staff need support in terms of wellness and secondary trauma and leadership development. And we need to continue to invest in leaders of color and engagement of diverse board members, and then looking at opportunities for cost sharing opportunities for nonprofits. We're looking into different, if the Alliance can play a role in insurance options, we need to look for new solutions for some of these issues to address the new reality. We are going to go into questions in just a minute, but first we want to give you the opportunity to see the interactive data dashboard that Jaya has created. I just put a link in the chat, but she's also going to share her screen and walk you through how you can use it to slice data, so that if you're particularly interested in a particular type of organization serving a particular issue area or location, you'll be able to segment and disaggregate the data for that population. So Jaya.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Elaine, for those for sharing those insights. Now let's move on to the dashboard. I'm so excited to share this dashboard with you all. So this dashboard reflects responses of 238 nonprofit leaders across the state. And this would basically cover the needs in the community, demand for services, staffing and financial challenges, impact due to executive orders, and a lot more in this dashboard. So to just get started, now here we are on the survey respondents page, which demonstrates about the demographics of our participants. So we have like organizational revenue, years in existence, focus area, the most represented focus area. Now coming to the right of the dashboard, the page, we have these slicers, which helps us filter based on location served, organizational revenue, full-time staff, and focus area. So when we click on this drop down, we get option to choose an option, and here we could do multiple selection as well. So we just have to do control click and we could do as many selections as we want. So I will also let you know, like, since Nancy and Elaine covered on the insights, I will focus more on the steps on how to navigate this dashboard. So also these slices are synced. By synced, I mean like, when we do a selection at one page, those selections would reflect on all the other pages as well. So to quickly look into that, let's go to other pages. So coming to the left of this page, we have these page navigation menu. And let's go to the workforce page to see how the slices are synced. To tell a little bit about this page, here we covered the staffing challenges faced by our nonprofits. And here you may see that those slices, the selections that we have already selected, that still is synced. And we do have the flexibility to uncheck these selections and check the one that we want. And this small little icon here, that's going to help us clear the selections for any filters that we have selected. And moving on to the location served. So we see list of cities that are listed, and we have this search option that's going to make our search easier. So we just have to type in the few letters of the city name, and that helps us, that filters out the entire page for that selected criteria. And this makes the search easier, and we could click on that eraser icon to clear the selections. And here I have like few examples which I wanted to show, like, how to slice and dice the visuals in order to get the insights. So when we choose a particular organization, so between like, $500,000 to $1 million organization, and we see that in that range, almost all of the organizations mentioned that some staff to all staff, they are experiencing staff burnout, they experience compassion fatigue, and all of them mentioned the staffs are experiencing emotional exhaustion, and physical exhaustion. This is very hard time for those organizations, and hiring is also not easy for them. So if we see the duration that took for them to hire a staff, close to 50% are taking like more than 3+ months. So which is not easy on their part. And next, I would want to move on to the federal issues page to show you examples of some of the insights. So here, let me clear the selection. And for the focus area, if we to tell a little bit about this page, here we cover about the impacts of the increased immigration enforcement and the impact of executive orders, and then some of the federal funding issues faced by nonprofits. So here, when we choose the focus area or organizations focusing on basic needs services, we see that 49% of them mentioned they see decreased in in-person participation, and then 43 mentioned the clients are experiencing racial profiling. And when we look for the immigrants, the organization that focus on immigrants and refugees, they mentioned that 75% of their clients are 75% of the organization mentioned that their clients are experiencing racial profiling, and 69% mentioned the clients are, there is a decrease in in-person participation. So that's something to keep in mind on how to slice and dice the visuals to learn more about this. Next, we could move on to the increased cost. This page covers the expense change between 2024 and 2025 and the planned actions to be taken in 2026 to address these current financial environment. So when we come to this visual here, we see that the user have the option to toggle between value and percentage. So when we click value, the data labels would show as numbers, and when we click percentage, we see the percentage for the same value. And here, this small little down arrow that we see, that helps to sort this column numerically, and this column would be sorted similarly like alphabetically. And coming to the planned 2026 actions to address current financial environment, we see that under that we have elimination of programs and services. We see 37 organizations have responded to this survey question, and those organizations felt the expense change has increased significantly or somewhat increased. So probably this could be the reason, why they want to eliminate their programs or services. And in order to come back to the default view, we could either click the same bar, or we could come back to the bottom of the page where we have this reset filter. So clicking on that would bring back to the default view. And next to that, we have this info button. So clicking onto that info button is going to display just all the explanations that I gave, the page navigation buttons, the reset, the filters, and then we talk about the slices here, and then the toggle button. And here we have the logo. So when we click on the Alliance logo, we should be able to go to the website page. It's just an information about that. And we are back to our increased cost page. Now let's move on to the survey respondents page. And the final thing that I want to mention here is clicking on this logo would take us to the website page where we can learn more about Alliance for Nonprofit Impact. And we would have the dashboard link also embedded in the website page. And I would leave the rest for you to explore more on these, the dashboard pages. And yeah, feel free to explore more and let us know if you have any questions regarding navigating the dashboard. Thank you all.
Thanks so much, Dea. We're so excited about having that ability to share that